lovely to think that our champagne and chocolates and celebrations could be had today, but Simon's right, we're not there yet. And actually, I'm hoping later on we will look at that map, because it's not only Wales where there are gaps, and it's really interesting to wonder why. We mustn't spend too long now because we've got a cracking good session coming along in a minute. But I would like perhaps, well, either, of course, if you want to comment on what you've heard, I think perhaps if you'd like to say, yes, we are finding confidentiality a huge obstacle, or no, it's something else. If anybody's got a feeling of what are the obstacles, why isn't everybody doing it? You know, we've had the chief nursing officer, we've had the dementia czar, we've had the Alzheimer's Society, but actually, we're still only on 396 hospitals. So just to Professor Oliver or to Simon Hatch, where do you think the obstacles are, or do you want to comment on anything they've said? Just a quick one, Liz.
So confidentiality, you can't look after anybody or plan the discharge from hospital without speaking to the family all the time. The occupational therapists are on the phone to people, the doctors are on the phone to people. You have to have information above the bed about swallowing instructions or moving and handling instructions. And by the way, when the general public was surveyed about this, they were perfectly happy to have things like the name above the bed, and even the CQC probably aren't going into wards saying you cannot have a conversation with someone in a 6-patient bay in case other people over here, and if they do, they should be shot, you know? Yeah. So this is excessive fear and excessive caution, and obviously I work very closely with nurses, and I'm not having a go at nurses when I say this, but it's nurses that are extremely concerned often about there'll be in trouble about confidentiality. The legitimate concern is I'm having sometimes quite an emotionally sensitive conversation with a patient's family, with other patients in earshot, in a ward round. If I take people off the ward to chat to them, I'll never get the ward round finished, and that puts us in a very difficult bind. But I think the confidentiality is probably being used as an excuse, and if you actually try doing it, the concerns evaporate.
A bit more common sense. And confidence?
Yeah, but bear in mind the climate of fear has been engendered by the regulators, and sometimes in the culture of NHS management. You look on the Health Service Journal message boards, they're all anonymised. They don't even name themselves because they're so frightened. You know, so I don't think we should be judging people for being frightened. What they need is their matron, their director of nursing, to be saying, it's okay. We've got your back, and we're certainly not going to be criticising you for having people on the wall. That's what they need.
No.
So.
Right. But Liz, I think you had a question. We are keeping an eye on the...
Hi. I think... oh, crikey, sorry. I think a lot of the obstacles, in my personal experience, are kind of cognitive ones in a way. It's not anything structural, it's what's in people's heads, things like ward culture, and it's getting everybody to work together. Eventually we can take everybody with us, but it's slow and it's going to take a long time. You know, and I don't know how we can, probably post-Francis, still got a lot of work to do about negative and toxic cultures. Just an observation.
But how do the children's wards overcome these obstacles then? They've been doing it for years. They must have exactly the same problems.
It took them a while, though, didn't it?
I know, but they're doing it now, aren't they? You know, so they must have a solution to the confidentiality problem. Otherwise, they wouldn't all be doing it, would they?
The 400 wards that have got the St John's campaign certificate aren't that fussed about confidentiality, are they? So, you know, if people actually do it, the concerns evaporate, but they need the permission to do it, don't they, really? But by the way, you might be worried about the patient's name above the bed, but the relatives come and read the stool charts and stuff at visiting time without anybody stopping them. So I do think we've got a bit precious about that, really.
I just want to agree with the doctor. It is a lot to do with the fact that matrons, head of nurses, director of nurses, chief execs, it's all about them saying, you know, nurses are not allowed to discuss things with people, the legislation, it's all about confidentiality. So there's a lot of fear factor from the poor nurse that's on the ward level, that is just newly qualified, that comes in, is frightened to death of doing something in case she gets into trouble and she gets struck off. So, you know, I think everybody needs to stop and just appreciate about what the nurses are feeling, these very junior nurses. I think that it needs to come from the top down to say, come on, let's do the open visiting. We've had open visiting now for 4 years on our ward, and it's worked perfectly fine. So we just need to have a top-down push on this. That's how I think it'll come to fruition.
You would want me to say something, and then we'll have, I think, one more, and then we better move on.
I was really just wanting to, as a ward that has joined up to John's campaign and does use it quite often, I absolutely agree with you. I think the confidentiality issue is a big get-out clause for everybody. There's ways round about it. And I think as well, obstacles for it, I think people build it up in their mind that it's something much bigger than it is. Actually, all I'm doing is opening my doors and welcoming people and speaking with them and building up a relationship with them. So I think we can sit for hours and hours and talk about what if, but actually when you put it into practice, it's much easier.
Can I just say as well about the relationship? Yeah, I didn't mention that, but you're so right. They get to know, for instance, the junior doctors or the occupational therapists on first name terms, find out what they do and where they live and stuff like that. And once they know the ward team as individuals, as long as they're not horrible individuals, which happens, then actually you get a report and you're far less likely to get people going to PALS or complaints, and they can see how hard people are working. So it's win-win, actually, isn't it?
And the family will bring you another C, they'll bring you cakes in.
I don't need any more cakes, madam.
We've had no complaints in the last 4 years since we've had
Yeah.
ours open, so that's a very valid point.
That is excellent.
I'm a social worker, and I'm really puzzled by the conversation, really, because when I go and see any client, I have to sign a form with them as to who I can talk to. And for every person that they're not able to discuss with me, I do a best interest decision if they lack capacity. So it's a complete no-brainer. I'm really puzzled by this conversation, because why do you not just have confidential permission to share forms? That just baffles me that you don't have that, because that's what happens in social care.
Well, trying to get somebody to sign a permission to share form who themselves has delirium or is in a coma or has dementia.
But that's what I'm saying, that in those situations,
Well, who signs it?
I would make a best interest decision as the social
Well,
worker.
I think you need a reality check about what hospitals are like. We have, in my trust, medium-sized hospital, we have 90 to 100 adult admissions coming through the doors every day. On a ward round, you've got about 8 minutes to see every patient and get round before lunch. 8 or 9 of those patients are new. You've got to see them, make clinical decisions, review the investigations, do the prescription, reassure the relatives. Yes, of course, we make best interest determinations and mental capacity assessments about people when it's material. You simply haven't got the time to be doing it for
It wouldn't have
everybody.
to be obviously be a consultant, it could be anybody on the ward.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people lack the confidence to do capacity assessments, actually. So, yeah.